All right, thank you for coming, everyone. My name is Rod Johnson. I'm with the Public Works Department and project manager. I've been doing projects like this for quite a few years now. I won't even tell you how long, but we also have Vicki Fisher here, who is the Community Development Director. They are in charge of the operation of the parking ramp. We also have Anna Gilligan, who is the Parking Operations Manager. And with us also is Stefan Kilber from Albertson Engineering. They're the consulting firm that has been working on the renovation of the parking ramp. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a few things. Number one, I want to let you know where we're at in this project right now. We actually advertised this project just recently, a couple weeks ago. Yesterday we had a pre-bid meeting, which is a meeting for potential bidders. Had that here at City Hall. Had what we thought was good interest in the project. And this project then will go to bid on October 11th. So that's where we're at in the stage. After that, then, you know, with assuming we have good bids, would be a potential bid award. With that, I guess, you know, what we want to talk about, number one, is schedule. We also want to talk about, you know, what we're doing, why we're doing it, those sort of things. And then we'll finish up with some of the alternatives that community development, Anna in particular, has been working on as far as parking alternatives. And then we'll finish up with questions. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Stephen Gilligan, who's going to do a presentation on the work that they've been doing up to now.
All right, thanks, Rod. Again, I am Stefan Kilber. I am a licensed structural engineer here in Rapid City. I am also the project manager. We are the lead designer on this garage repair project. Here are the names and companies of the other individuals that make up the design team. As Rod said, we're currently in the process of bidding this project out with the hope of getting 2 or 3 bids here on October 11th. I'm going to ask the question right now, how many of you are here primarily because of project schedule? Hands raised, a few of you, a vast majority of you. All right, well, before we get into an overview of the project itself, let's talk schedule. Yesterday we did have the pre-bid meeting, and the contractors, so the current schedule right now in the construction documents is the project would start middle of November, with the garage being shut down from middle of November to essentially beginning part of January. And then they would need to be done right before Memorial Day weekend this next year. A lot of the general contractors had concerns with that schedule. And we also understand that there's been some concerns from downtown business owners and user groups about the garage being shut down over Christmas. So we have a proposed solution, which we did pitch to the contractors, and they are in favor of this, and that is to formally start the project on January 9th after the holiday season, and then we would finish October 13th. I wasn't quite sure how we were going to format this. Any questions or discussion we want to do on that, we'll wait till the end of this presentation. But in general, is this a little bit more amiable schedule? Do I get some head nods? I got 1, 2, 3. All right, cool. Not quite a quorum, but maybe close. Let's jump into why we're doing this project. We've got a few slides that overview the extent of the repairs structurally, mechanically, electrically. The vast majority of these issues almost are entirely driven by moisture and the use of salts during the winter season to mitigate icing. Picture on the left-hand side is an image taken below the second floor deck along the Main Street square length of the garage. What we have here is an area where moisture, instead of draining off the deck, has essentially sat there, and it's permeated down through the entire depth of the concrete deck and is kind of causing corrosion and destruction along the way. You see this kind of white, flaky, snow-looking substance. That's called efflorescence, which means the concrete is beginning to be broken down by the moisture. We also have rust bleeding and rust staining, which means the internal reinforcement is corroding as part of that presence of both moisture and salts. The right-hand picture is an image taken on the, again, below the second floor along the north ramp line, where we have a precast edge element that, again, has experienced more significant deterioration where moisture has penetrated into that concrete, has corroded that internal reinforcement, caused it to expand, and is now beginning to spall or kind of explode that cover concrete away, revealing the reinforcement. If you've ever been in the garage and you've heard a car driving and you hear a loud kerchunk, what you are hearing is them driving over what's shown on the left-hand side, which is, we're calling them sandwich plate joints, where during original construction, the double T's were not fabricated quite correctly. There were supposed to be connectors along their joint lines that were meant to mitigate their flange tips from moving relative to one another as a car drove over them. Those connectors were not installed appropriately. As a previous repair, these kind of sandwich plates were meant to be installed top and bottom to mitigate that movement. They're not doing any of that. They're along for the ride. And so that noise is actually those plates being bounced as a vehicle drives. That large differential movement between the flanges is actually tearing up that joint sealant, and as you can see in that picture, we actually have on all of these joints extensive moisture infiltration to the underside of the deck and the double T's where we don't want the moisture to be. The final structural picture, this is actually a column located at the southeast stairs right by the garbage compactor. Again, this is a vertical element that it actually has kind of significant cracking, spalling issues kind of throughout its entire height from second floor down to ground, again, due to moisture infiltration and the resulting corrosion and deterioration from that. As we jump over to mechanical issues, the left and right pictures both show deteriorated vertical drain piping. The entirety of the vertical drain piping and the existing floor drains are to be replaced. Actually, the center picture shows a couple floor drains that weren't sized appropriately in a previous project, and they're now completely clogged. In addition, along the second floor south line on the Main Street Square side, we're adding, I believe, an additional 10 floor drains to help mitigate some of that duct ponding that happens on a regular basis in the low spots of the deck. Electrically, again, it's pretty much an overhaul. Due to moisture kind of throughout the structure, you can see it on the left-hand side, we have extensive corrosion of the conduit, and I understand that there are actually certain electrical functions and circuits in the garage that work intermittently because the moisture has penetrated into the conduit and now is attacking the wires themselves. The primary service panel is located on the north end of the garage right now in this fantastic, beautiful looking cabinet. We are going to provide a new service panel, and we're actually going to tuck it nicely inside of Main Street Square's fenced off area where there are several other electrical panels. This will provide better access, and it will also provide better protection for that service panel. I don't want to spend a lot of time on the stairs, these next two slides, because you all walk these probably every day. These stairs have a variety of corrosion deterioration issues, from general surface corrosion, rust pitting, where moisture actually gets behind the paint and the paint actually holds the moisture up to the steel, causing more localized extensive damage than if it were just bare steel open to the air. The stair treads themselves that are concrete are in poor shape. That's a safe word to use. They have very uneven, unequal walking surfaces. This picture I wanted to keep in here as a reference. We presented this to Public Works. The original parking garage with the concrete stairs were constructed in 1998, and so the left-hand picture is meant to serve as a reference of this is what the stairs would have looked like during original construction. You fast forward to 2013, which was the last large repair remediation project at the garage, and you already see that some of the concrete, you see rust staining, corrosion of some of the underlying structural supports, and then you also see cracking of certain concrete treads. We fast forward to today, those same stairs, that concrete is now bulged out of its underlying support steel, making a very uneven, kind of curved walking surface. It presents a potential trip hazard, realistically. So as part, and in addition to the renovation items that we kind of already highlighted, we are also proposing that the southwest and southeast stairways be enclosed. The primary reasons for this is we want to mitigate that potential for slip, trips, and falls, to mitigate that potential for snow and ice buildup on the stairs. It is going to provide better protection not just for the users that have to navigate the stairs on a regular basis, but also for the structure itself. I have a couple slides later on that we're going to look at actually the Pennington County stairway enclosure at their garage and how well that's performed over the last 9-10 years. Here's a couple other renderings showing both the southeast and southwest stairways, what we're ultimately looking to achieve as part of the proposed stair enclosures for this project. Here's a comparison of the southwest stair at Block 75, which by far is probably the most heavily used stair of the two at this garage, compared with the current stair enclosures at the Pennington County garage. For those of you who use the garage at night, here's a comparison of what we're looking to achieve as part of this future project. We will be renovating the lights in the Block 75 garage to go to a more whiter, brighter LED fixtures. And as you can see, the Pennington County garage stair feels very open even at night. If you do happen to go over there, there's very few places someone could essentially loiter or hide in that stair that you wouldn't be able to visually see as someone walking up or approaching the garage. So this project is an extensive top-down maintenance renovation project of the entire garage. And it's of such extent and size that there is no way that a contractor is readily, effectively going to be able to tackle it all at once in a short period of time. In our construction documents, we have provided what is phasing. And we've tried to break out or chunk out the work in manageable enough pieces for the contractor to address in a timely fashion. In our drawings, phase one, and I say phase one simply because that was the first phase, we wanted to get that up front and center before the contractors, that is going to be the phase that the garage will need to be shut down. At this point, we have proposed for it to be shut down for 8 weeks. With the proposed schedule shift, it is likely that this will not be the first phase that they do. They will likely do this. If it were me and I got the project, I would probably do it somewhere between March and April to start that shutdown. But the primary reason we are shutting down the garage is there's some extensive concrete work that has to be done up on 3rd floor that actually requires shoring on both the ramp side and the south side all the way down to ground level. And their contractor is going to tear relatively large holes into the concrete deck, about 20 feet wide, 20 feet long, 8 feet wide in 2 spots, to where unless you feel like trying to jump a big hole with your car, to better manage that safety, we are recommending that the garage be entirely shut down. For the other phases, there are essentially 10 other phases in the project. The intention is for the garage to be partially shut down, i.e. any work as shown in that lower right picture, any work within a specific quadrant of the garage is the contractor would essentially have control of that area to manage and to do the work in that area both above and below, whether it's on 1st floor, 2nd, or 3rd, above and below access, but then they would need to provide safe egress, not just for walking users, but also for people navigating to and from, in and out of the garage, essentially through that space. You're going to have to kind of think of this as a very condensed road construction project where you're going to have safety cones that there may be flaggers, I'm not quite sure. The contractor is going to have to present and maintain a safety plan in addition to an overall general phasing plan for this project. I know that was a lot of information, and I believe, as Rod said, this is being recorded, so if you have questions, feel free to ask them, either of me or the city representatives that are here.
Thank you, Stefan. Again, my name is Vicki Fisher. I'm the Director of Community Development. I think that it was important for us to see the state of the current structure and knowing that we need to make repairs because this structure is important to us as a community. We recognize that as someone who has a business or someone who lives in this area, someone who has customers, this parking structure is essential for us to all be successful. We want to partner with you. We want to make sure that any inconvenience you feel is mitigated to the greatest degree possible. And so knowing the scope of the work that needs to be done, it helped me when Rod came to me to say, okay, this is what we need and this is the length of time. Having this additional information was very important. One of the things that Stefan pointed out too is showing the life of the stairwells. When it was originally built, when it was improved in 2013, and then the deteriorated state that it is today. Similar to the enclosure on the stairwells, a huge dollar price on these repairs is providing a sealant. And again, not being in the construction world, the best way that they could explain it to me is, for those of us who are homeowners, you go out and you stain your deck. If you don't put a sealant on it, you're just restaining it and restaining it and restaining it. But with a sealant, you get a little more life behind that. And so this sealant will hopefully minimize future repairs and extend the length of time before we would be faced with having to do such a major renovation again. Anna Gilligan, being our parking operations division manager, has successfully worked with the Block 5 project. And as you may recall, there were 155 surface parking spaces that have been eliminated from the city's parking availability, and we had to relocate all the users of that surface parking. And in doing so, she was very successful in working with each user to improve their parking options, trying to get them closer to their destination. And sometimes it was even a money-saving venture for them. We want to partner with you one-on-one to ensure that your parking needs are addressed. And so today, if I could introduce Anna Gilligan, she's kind of going to go through some of the options that we have. Just know that after this meeting, we will begin direct communications with those that use the structure, that are permit holders, that have customers that use it, so that we can coordinate with you to ensure that you've got identified parking through all phases of this. So Anna, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Like Vicki said, I'm Anna Gilligan. I'm the parking operations manager. I know some of you, some familiar faces in here, and I'm sure I've talked to more of you on the phone. So I thought we'd start by just going over some of the data points that I'm using when looking at this project and the relocation that needs to happen for the permit holders in there. So right now there are 104 uncovered parking spaces on the top level of the parking structure. There are 203 covered spaces in the parking structure, and then we have 100 spaces on the bottom floor that are metered public parking. We have 158 permits for the uncovered area and 234 permits for the covered area. These numbers are based on a 90% occupancy in the leased areas. So I take the number of spaces and use that to determine how many permits that we're going to allow in those areas. And in the last couple of weeks, I've had the parking enforcement officers in the parking garage looking at the situation and doing vehicle counts in there. So in the last 2 weeks, the maximum number of vehicles we've had in uncovered parking has been 44, and in covered parking it's been 102. So altogether in leased parking, the total was 146. Now I know this will change depending on the time of year, But this is the type of studies that we do to determine like how many vehicles do we need to find space for. On the map, you can see all of the areas circled in yellow. All of those zones are areas that I've identified as potential relocation zones for permit holders in the garage. And it's going to depend on what works for the individual or business and how close those areas are to the business or the location that they're trying to get to. So. Vicki, I'll turn it back over to you.
So I think what we wanted to do today is create that line of communication. There's a couple things that are very important that you need to ensure that your parking needs are being met, and to ensure that you're aware of the project and where it's going and when it will be complete. After this meeting, we will provide you with Anna's email address so we can start the discussions as to what are those parking needs. As an example, Alex Johnson has valet parking in this parking structure. And as Stefan explained, there will be a period where the parking structure is closed down entirely, and there will be a period where we're kind of moving people around. So we need to coordinate with each other so everyone's aware of where that is. And that's where Anna comes into place. I've seen her do it. I've seen her do it on very large projects. And being able to say that if you're going to be displaced from the parking structure for that 2-month period of time, where do you go? We need to know where your end result is. We may even be able to find you something that can save some steps, not in all instances, but in some instances. But as we're going outward from that parking structure, we want to make sure that we are giving you preferential treatment if your end location is east, west, south of the parking ramp. So that will start as of today, where we get that communication going. Assuming then that the project does launch in the middle of January, fingers crossed that we get some good bids that work and fall within the price range that council's allowed for this, and we can get started, then Stefan and I have been visiting about creating a link on the city's website where you can check in to see where we're at with that project. And it wouldn't be a daily update. It might be every 2 to 3 weeks we'd work with the contractors to get that update so that we're all informed at the same time as to when does it get shut down, when does it get opened up, what area of the parking structure is going to be removed from access, what opens up. And of course, Anna needs to know that far in advance because she needs to be contacting you saying, you'll now be parking in this part of the structure, or you'll now be parking on the street or some other leased parking area at that time. I think that if it is an inconvenience. It's an inconvenience for all of us, but it's something that needs to be done. We don't have an option. So I think if we just keep an open line of communication and try to work through this, we can get to the end result, and then hopefully it will be many, many years before we would have to do something like this again. We would like, for those of you that would like to get started right away, for you to provide Anna with email addresses. And as she said, she knows some of you and she has them. But if you haven't been emailing Anna, let's get that started. And we are recording this meeting today. We realize there's a lot of businesses, owners that couldn't attend, and others just interested that would like to know, hey, when I go downtown, I like that metered parking. What are my options? So if you do have a question or would like to speak, we do ask that you go to the lectern so that it is recorded and everyone can hear what you have to say. But we are standing for questions right now. We hope that you understand our intent is to partner with you and to ensure that it minimizes the impact, especially on your businesses. Thank you for those of you, Dan, I'm mentioning you specifically, who shared with us right up front, closing the parking structure down during the Christmas holiday would have a negative impact on downtown. Rod and his team immediately acknowledged that, and yesterday at the pre-bid meeting, it seemed to work well with the contractors too. As you know, there's a shortage of material in in the world right now, and having that additional lead time, what we don't want to have happen is the project to start, and then they say, hey, we can't get the glass in for 3 months. Let's give them that time to get everything ready, so when we start, it's ready, set, go. And that was a relief for them as well, that they'd have that additional time. So I think just having you folks reach out to us provide back that information, we can make this as painless as possible. Obviously, we will all be inconvenienced. It just goes to show the importance of that parking structure and why we need to get on it right now and preserve it. Anyone with questions, please just go to the lectern.
I'm Dan Tribby with Prairie Edge. Thanks for having this meeting. This is a really big help for all of us. And I just have some kind of general things. Obviously, our holiday is it's really important. But I have not really questions, but I wonder then in the end of January and the beginning of February when the stock show comes, if that's going to be addressed as well. Because I would imagine some of our parking is going to have to bleed over somewhere towards the Civic Center, and you guys all know how that kind of works out at the end of January and the beginning of February, and I'm sure that will all be worked out. I'm not really looking for an answer on that, but some of the things over the years that we've talked about, if some changes were ever allowed to be made in the parking structure, one of them, is there any possibility to add speed bumps when this is being redone? It is truly just a matter of time before somebody gets hurt or worse in there. There's actual car clubs operating in the ramp, and they're tearing things up in there, and it's just a matter of time. You know, I mean, it's not if it's going to happen, it's going to be when, and how bad is that damage going to be. So we would really appreciate if that could be a possibility, or at least looked at, if there's some way to slow people down in there. Another thing that we have trouble with, and I know your enforcement people do, you know, those are the minimum width parking spaces that are in there, and we get that. Is there any chance that when those surfaces are remarked, that those markings could go up the walls? It just would really save a lot of the stuff that everybody's dealing with of parking over the lines, and we'd probably get more people in there, and it would just work out a little bit better. The cameras have been an issue, and I think part of that's the corrosion got to the wiring and some of the conduits in there where the cameras work part-time at best. And if we're going to have that and spend the money on it, it would just be nice if they, you know, if they worked. And if we do have the, you know, the enclosed thing, I think that's a great idea. We have concerns about loitering, and we have concerns about bad activity in those covered spaces, especially in the when the weather starts to get a little bit colder. We just concerns about, is that going to be where our homeless end up gathering, and is that going to be addressed, and how is that going to be addressed? And then during these closures, how do we address the parking on the street? I doubt you'll allow free parking, and we don't want that. You know, we don't want our employees parking on Main Street or St. Joe. So we just hope some consideration gets given to that. So we're just not shifting our employees, and we have the same problem. We lose the street parking to employee parking, which is kind of how we got here in the first place. But those are just off the top of my head, and when it comes down to assigning parking, is the parking permit still, will my employees still need to pay for that through this whole process? Will there be a grace period if we end up moving over behind the mill and park over there, and I'm sure those things will all get answered in time, but those are the concerns that we've had coming up to here anyway. Thanks a bunch.
So, thank you, Dan. Those were excellent comments. The things I can share with you that I know off the top of my head are that as far as the enclosed stairwells, we have looked at what systems other communities have used to discourage loitering, and there are some cool systems out there. The one that I loved, it's a sensitive camera that sits in those stairwells, and if anyone is in a stairwell and doesn't move for 15 minutes, a siren goes off and strobe lights, so you couldn't just continue. I mean, it could probably raise the dead. So no one's going to be able to sustain that. And, you know, if need be, we'll look at those things. We've seen through the history of looking at what other communities have done, especially in downtown areas where you have enclosed stairwells, they are open. So it'll get cold in the winter and hot in the summer. They're completely transparent, so you're not going to hide in there. But it will be a shield from the wind, the snow, and the rain, and we do want to make sure that no one is loitering. If need be, we are looking at systems that we could install that would discourage that to the greatest degree possible. We too are frustrated with the speeding that goes on in the parking structure. It's a huge concern. We'll visit with our city engineer. It is not something that is typically supported to put speed bumps. It's difficult for maintenance. If there should ever need to be any snow removal, that's very difficult. We have had some folks that use the parking structure with low cars that are concerned we're going to put speed bumps in. They pay that high premium to preserve that car. They don't want speed bumps. But what Anna approached me with, and it's something that we're looking at, is actually hiring an independent patrol company that would come in and help us patrol the parking structure. It's just too much for the Rapid City Police Department to do in and of itself. And so that would have to come out of our parking budget, but we think it would be worth it because we are concerned with some of the activity that goes on. Right now we'll get a fender bender, but one of these days it's going to be a pedestrian that's leaving their parking space that gets hit. So we need to get ahead of that and prevent it as much as possible. When we do find alternate parking, these are usually spaces that are out on the street right now that are already being permitted or leased. So if you are paying a fee in the parking structure, you'll probably still have to pay that fee, and we just need it for the revenue to do this project and other projects. As our downtown grows, we anticipate that in the future we will need another parking structure. We are doing a parking study next year, and we'll be partnering closely with all of the downtown businesses, hiring an outside firm to come in and do that study. Should it be over by the YMCA? Should it be closer to the School of Mines? You know, we get kind of a pull and tug from people saying, well, this is where it needs to go. So we're going to do a study. But again, that all costs money. And so just that little bit of monthly revenue makes a big difference. And right now we're sitting at right at $4 million for this renovation. And so I don't think we'll probably be waiving parking fees during this time. But again, the location and the convenience are important to us, and we want to make sure that we are helping you get to and from where you need to be and ensure that your customers can get to you during your open hours. So if you see something that isn't working, if you're assigned a spot and you don't like it, we can work with you to get it moved. The stock show and rodeo, obviously, none of the parking we're looking at would put us over Omaha Street. We don't want people walking across that state highway. Craig Baltzer, the Civic Center director, the monument director, he does not put parking in this structure. He has alternate parking lined up in different areas of the city for that overflow parking that he may experience. So I don't think that we're going to have that conflict. But there are a lot of people that come in from out of town to the stock show and rodeo that want to come downtown. And we want to make sure that we are preserving the street parking. Dan, again, you made a wonderful comment. We don't want to take up customer parking for employee parking. So we'll have to get creative with you folks to make sure that doesn't happen. We'd rather the employee walk a little further to make sure your customers can get to your front door as quickly as possible. Wonderful comments.
I would just add also, Stefan mentioned it, that there is a period of time, that the parking structure will be shut down completely, but it wouldn't necessarily be during the stock show. So I think we need to, once we get a contractor on board, we can work through that schedule and see how that time frame fits, certainly for them from a construction standpoint, and then, and then we'll address it from there. But so it's I think very likely. I'm not going to say it's absolutely certain, but it's very likely that during the stock show that that we may just have a partial shutdown.
Good morning. Clancy Kingsbury with Who's Hobby. Dan covered most of the questions and comments that I had, along with a few I hadn't thought of, and I appreciate that. But one thing I wanted to comment on was the parking that you have in the garage right now with the kiosk. My wife Summer has a business in Main Street Square, and I've got one at Who's Hobby, of course, down the street, and we have the parking meters out in front, which has been great. Our customers have places to park, and in the beginning we had a few people grumbling about the parking meters, but anymore our customers are appreciative that they can find a place close to park now. So I think the programs work good, but my wife and I, before the parking meters were implemented, we expressed the desire to have meters in the garage exactly like what's on the street. And so if there's any way that you could incorporate that, I've used both. If you have the app on your phone, parking in the garage is a piece of cake. You just say you're in the garage and add time. But most of our customers, especially if they're from out of town, they're not going to download that app. They're going to try and pay at the kiosk. And I know it has something to do with the electrical needs for those meters, whether it be solar panels or whatnot. But we would like to see some consistency. So if people are used to parking on the street, when they park in the parking garage, they would be faced with the same type of meter and not have to figure out how to use the kiosk system. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Rob Kegren. I'm the COO of the Downtown Firehouse Properties. First, I just want to thank you for being proactive in having already kind of heard our concerns about the schedule and already coming up with the proposed solution. It's refreshing to have city officials plan ahead and to anticipate what our concerns are going to be. I have a number of questions. My first one is, who ultimately gets to approve the timeline? I know in Stefan's presentation he mentioned that if it were up to him, the full closure of the structure would be sometime around March or April. Is it entirely the contractor's decision as to when the whole structure gets closed? And I ask that because, as we've talked about, they need more time necessarily to get materials and or labor. If there is any kind of delay in that, is there any possibility that they would be allowed to close the structure as we get towards tourist season in 2023? And I would obviously strongly urge that that would not be something that would be allowed. But I ask the question in that, does the contractor have the ability to do that at any moment? My second question is, Stefan also mentioned there would be about 10 phases of closures of partial parts of the structure. Do we have an idea of how many spots each of those would close down. Obviously, it'd be a different section each time, but are we talking about 40 spots at a time or 100? And I ask that because obviously with the proposed timeline going into October, that goes through the entirety of our summer, and the more spots that are taken up, even if it's rotating, the more of a challenge it is for us on a nightly and weekend basis to accommodate our customers. My last comment really isn't so much of a question. You mentioned it would be unlikely that the fees that we pay would be waived during the time when the structure is closed. What I would ask is that if we're giving up a covered parking spot for an uncovered parking spot, that there would be some reflection of that in what we pay. And I think that's fair, that we would still pay something, but not the full amount for a covered spot. And I'm from New York City originally, so if you don't understand me through my accent, I apologize.
Just on the fees, and I'll let Rod speak to the construction. My apologies. When we find you alternate parking, that's the fee you'll pay, not what you were paying in the parking structure. And as I mentioned on Block 5, when we had to relocate them, in some instances it saved them money because we could get them in some place that didn't fee as high. And we'll do the same here. If you're paying for that high-end covered parking and now you're out in the street, that's going to go down. So thank you.
So your question regarding, you know, who has final say in the schedule, you know, what we try to do once we get a contract together is, you know, we try to partner with the contractor so that they can be successful. So depending on the contractor, they may want to approach the project a little differently. Now, one of the things that we could do would be to, within our addendum to the contract, you know, we could certainly say that the full closure has to happen before a certain date. Let's just say, you know, Memorial Day weekend or whatever. Prior to that date, you know, that full closure work has to be completed. You know, to me, that's reasonable. Stefan, would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay. And then we will work with the contractor to come up with a schedule that, you know, that makes the work certainly efficient for them. You know, we want them to be successful. If they're successful, then we all are. So.
And a good point, too, is it's imperative that we have open communication throughout all of this. So as the project advances forward, different phases are completed, new ones begin, we all need to know, specifically Anna, because she's going to be scampering, moving people around inside the structure, communicating with you, making sure that we're all aware of what that entails. So we need a lead time to do that, so you don't just show up on Monday and you can't park where you were told to park last week and you're wondering where you can park. That's the one thing that we don't ever want to see happen. So again, creating that site that everyone can go to, when we're moving you, we will be relating that directly to you so that you're aware this is where your parking is during this phase of the project. And hopefully we can minimize those shifts. We can find some good parking and leave it there for the duration. But for when those times that we can keep you in the structure, we may have to move people around to some degree. But it's going to just take good, solid, open communication.
So your question regarding the phasing and how many stalls per phase, I think in general, and Stefan, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but in general, I think it was about a quarter of a level. So when you say, is it going to be 40 or 100, I would say it's going to be probably closer to 40 or less. Now, that may not be accurate every phase, but it's going to be closer to that 40 number than 100.
Hello, I'm Patty Griffin, owner of Alternative Fuel Coffee House, and I just had a couple of questions. One was in regards to the stair enclosures. In your mock-up, it stated or showed that they were very glass enclosed. And as we all know, we get the winds, we get the heat, we get the rain. How will the glass enclosures, I've been in parking areas where glass enclosures make it more damp, more humid, more heated within. How is that going to be alleviated? As well, how is the, as Dan brought up, the homeless population, they tend to use body functions anywhere and everywhere that they can. Bless their hearts, they don't have the access that we as homeowners do. How is this going to be patrolled? Because I can see the stairwells being a place of a bathroom, being just places where I, walking up and down, might be accosted. My staff, my young teenagers at night might be accosted more easily within an enclosed stairwell. That's a huge concern as a business owner that I have. Then the second question I had, I believe, possibly directed towards Anna. How will we as permit holders be notified as to when we need to be moved, where we need to move? I understand we're going to have more of a one-on-one, but if I'm in one of the four, can you bring that map back up? One of the four closer spots to the covered parking area are within those four circles above the CID, our parking garage. Are there enough parking spots for all of us who have permits in the covered and uncovered locations to accommodate all of us? So if there are not, am I going to be down on that furthest southern one and having to walk all that way? I have to park there, I have to walk all that way, but then I get a ticket. How am I going to be notified as to where I need to be, when I need to be, and when I cannot be there? And then who gets the priorities when the garage is a partial opening and partial closings?
I'll address one of your questions, and that's regarding the stairwell itself, the enclosure, and I would say a better way to describe it is a partial enclosure. It will not be enclosed on the interior side, just on the exterior sides, and that's to cut down wind, cut down weather coming into the structure. But you're still going to have breeze through there. It's going to be, let's just say, naturally ventilated. I guess some of your other concerns, operational concerns, to a certain extent, I think those concerns are there now, and I think those are some things that are going to take some more thought about how we address them. But I'll leave it at that.
So we are aware when body fluids are left behind in the parking structure, because Anna and her team has to go clean it up. What we're hopeful for, and what we've seen in other communities as well, even though this is just a partial enclosure, it will be better lit. It is completely transparent. We will put up loitering system security if we need to. In addition, as we're looking at hiring an independent private company for patrol, we think that we're actually going to improve the safety of the parking structure from where it stands today. They won't only be monitoring the stairwells, but they'll be monitoring anyone leaving their vehicle and walking down a lane of the parking structure trying to get to where it is that they're going. So we are trying to improve the safety independent of this project. It's just coinciding that we're upstarting that discussion as this project is coming forward. Great comments. When we are looking at relocating, we are going to work with each of you. If someone needs a bulk number, and depending upon where that is, we'll try to work. I don't think anyone's going to be treated preferentially. It's really going to be a matter of letting Anna know where it is that you are using the parking to get to, so that she can try to find you alternate parking as close as possible. It is important that we do have that communication so that once you're out in the street and you're parked, that parking can be maintained until we can get you back in the structure. So it won't be, well, you can park in this street today, but now you have to park over here and you're going to get a ticket. We won't do that to you. We'll try to minimize the shifts. But again, as soon as we see the parking structure open up, for as many of you as we can, we're going to get you back in there. Because we know that that is probably the closest to where you need it to be. And it provides you with, in many instances, covered parking unless you're up on the 3rd level. So work with us, be flexible. Communication is imperative, and that's two-way. So if you don't like where you got relocated or it's not working and we need to look at that, we're open to do that. We're flexible. We want to try to make this work for you to the greatest degree possible, realizing that it is going to be an inconvenience. We want to minimize that inconvenience, but be flexible with our plan to ensure that it's working with you. Again, it's letting Anna have that contact information. D'Amico, I might reach out to you at some point to get as much of that contact info for those that aren't here, that maybe still aren't aware of what's happening, just so that we can go forward in a positive fashion. Of course, those that have permits, we do have that information. We'll be sending out letters of notice well in advance saying, giddy up, go, it's ready to start, here's what we're doing, and encourage those one-on-one conversations. Good comments, thank you. Anybody else? We're just about out of time. We got about 4 minutes left. If not, thank you all for coming today. This meeting isn't successful unless you show up and share with those that you work next to the information that you've heard today. Remember, we are going to have this available on YouTube and Facebook, the city's Facebook page. So if you didn't understand something, you want to go back and listen to it, someone else you know wasn't able to attend, encourage them to look at the taping. And if you do have questions, you can call any one of us. I think our names have been said several times in the meeting. We're here to help you better understand the process and to answer your questions as they arise. Thank you. Anna will be doing that at the end of this. I think she brought a stack of business cards.